Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us.
Luke is back with us. You can go back and listen to his episode early on in the podcast. But today he's coming back. He's going to give us a little snippet of his story, and then he's going to update us as to what's going on now. Welcome, Luke. It's good to see you.
It's great to be back, guys. I am beyond grateful to be here. Back to where I began,
Yeah, good to see you, Luke. It's been a while.
So just give us a kind of a nutshell of your story. They can go back and listen, but just so we can hit the road running, because your experience was a little different than we had before, and it brought up some really good points about being a survivor.
So, yeah, I was sexually assaulted by a woman, which, and that in itself, not a lot of males come forward about that. So from 16 to 18, she sexually assaulted me using drugs and alcohol to coerce me into, well, not coerce, she would drug us with drugs and alcohol and then hold me down and rape me. This continued. It was for, like I said, the period of from 16 to 18. And it happened 2 to 3, sometimes more times a week. And then she just, at 18, she stopped because I aged out.
Even though it stopped, you didn't really recognize it, right? As abuse.
No, I didn't. I didn't know it was abuse until I reached my 20s, I believe it was. And I was under the influence. And I was called somebody while I was intoxicated on alcohol. And I was talking about it with them, and they're like, that's rape. And that's when it really hit me that I was molested for the first time. I was self-destructing beforehand. After it all stopped, lots of drugs, lots of alcohol. I was a heroin addict. I was addicted to cocaine. I was addicted to alcohol for a long period of time. Gratefully, I'm clean now.
Congratulations.
Clean now.
Well done.
So how old were you when you really began the healing journey? Like you recognized it, but then you were self-destructing. What was it that started you on the healing journey?
So when I went to prison, actually was where I kind of started my healing journey, because there were psychiatrists in there and I had to see a psychiatrist, and I started talking about it, but it wasn't like a huge start. It wasn't really until I started actually telling my story, which started with you guys, that I actually was able to start my healing journey and start recognizing what's triggering me, what's not triggering me, what's going on internally with me, what's everything.
So when you were talking about with the psychiatrist or therapist or whomever at the jail, it didn't really help you healing, or you didn't feel like that was part of the process at that time?
And it was a psychology student as well. So I don't know if she knew how to cope with it. Because my story's pretty, I would say it's kind of complex as far as the ins and outs. It just, the whole lot of it is very complex. The amount of coercion she used, and something I didn't actually tell you guys, which I didn't realize until more recent, was that I had met her when I was 9. And it was something I blocked out, right? And even then, she was grooming me at 9.
Oh,
You know, Luke, what's so interesting to me about that is that we tell our story, we finally feel safe, but then there's so many elements. And even with Kevin and I,
yeah.
as long as we've been doing our work, I remember when we had the panel on grooming. And for Kevin, even though he knew all the things he knew, there was this new revelation. And I think that that's why it is so important for us to share our story and share with each other because, and I don't want to really use the term normalized, but it makes us realize we're not alone. And these things that we block because they're so scary or we don't want to tell anyone, then we go, oh, it is. Then we realize the degrees of safety and then we can share more as more comes out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we compartmentalize, it seems. And then as we explore it by talking about it, by recognizing our issues, looking at our issues, and the more we kind of explore that, I mean, even for me and Lori, we've learned more about ourselves and our process just continues. And we've discovered things about ourselves that has helped in our process, in our healing, even in these last couple of years of doing this podcast. And yeah, I think you were on that grooming panel, weren't you, Luke?
Yes,
I believe so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I didn't realize until that panel that I had been groomed, even though it wasn't a new thing what had happened to me, but what I realized was recognizing the grooming that happened before then. So when you talked to me on the phone and then we interviewed you, you feel like that's when things started happening as far as the process for you?
Oh,
The healing?
absolutely, absolutely.
Really?
You know, like I said, this is where I really got my start in not only just healing and advocacy work as well.
Yeah,
Which
you've been
is
busy.
just been amazing, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was gonna get like it has. That I was gonna be able to help as much as I have helped people.
Oh,
And I don't even know how many people I've helped because I don't, you know, the
yeah.
numbers don't matter.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
that
and
you help one person. That's all that matters.
Can
yeah,
you tell us about your advocacy work, what you're doing?
So I've done a bunch of panels. I'm doing panels with Mike. I believe we've been doing them pretty much on a monthly basis,
yeah.
which has been amazing.
So this is
Uh,
Mike Chapman,
correct.
who we call Santa Claus, but he has a podcast,
Male survivor.
Male Survivor.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe that's it.
Yeah, and we've interviewed him several times, and he actually took my class, and now he's doing his podcast, and he's been so consistent. And like Luke said, often we don't even know who we're helping, but when we're willing to share our story or be a good listener or say "I believe you," that helps survivors.
It's called Healing for Male Survivors.
Healing for Male Survivors. That's right. Yes. Thank you,
Yeah.
Luke.
And just to jump real quick, right back to the realization that I was groomed. I was at work when I realized this, and I was so angry that I wasn't angry at myself. I was angry that she groomed me at that young of an age. And you know, I'm young. I don't realize what's happened. But I was so frustrated. There's super sacks at work, which are filled with food. They're about 1,000 pounds. And I was hitting those. I was using those as a punching bag because I was just frustrated beyond. I don't know how to describe those emotions, honestly. There's just so many emotions that were coming out. I wanted to cry, but it wasn't coming out as tears. It was coming out as anger and pain that someone could do that.
Yeah.
To such a young child. And you know, I was just angry. But I did realize something else recently, and that was that she screwed up. And in a good way. She made one mistake, and that was taking me to her house at one point. It was just one instance where she screwed up, and now I'm able to track because I have it in my head after I realized this recently, the general area where she lived. So I've been looking to find where she lived exactly because she's moved, and I'm going to be seeking justice as far as law enforcement.
So have you gone to the police?
Yeah. They said they said they couldn't do anything at the moment because I didn't have her address, anything like that. And it wasn't until after I had gone to the police. It wasn't until about 2 weeks ago that I realized she had screwed up and had taken me to her place at one point. So it was quite a revelation to be like, okay, she screwed up. I can use this to my advantage. I can track where she lived because I have like it's only pictures in my head right now what the house looked like. The house has changed, so I spent 2 hours on Google Maps trying to find the house.
Now, do you think she's still a perpetrator? Is that why you want to
She's
find
in
out?
Florida somewhere. I don't even know where she's at.
Well, here's what Kevin and I have learned. Though for you, the statute of limitations is most likely up,
Yeah.
you can still file a report. And that
Mhm.
way, if anybody else files a report, now we start to have that because often they do continue perpetrating. And that's what we learned from Avreme because he did not want to go forward, but he did. And this lady had nannied many people. And so more people came forward and they were able to see justice served, even though his case was I believe, unless it changed in Utah, the statute of limitations, which is something a lot of people are working on to change. For murder, there is no statute. But you think about you're 9 years old, you've got 7 years. So by 16, you got to go to the police and you still aren't even, you're still a child.
And 9 years old, that was just the grooming. It wasn't until
Yeah.
she, 16 was when she started raping.
Yeah.
And
What,
for you, yeah.
What state were you in when this
Illinois.
happened? Illinois.
Illinois statute of limitations. There's no statute of limitations on sexual assault, felony sexual assault.
Well, that's
Okay.
good to know.
Yeah, the
Because
states are changing. They're getting better.
Yeah. And the other thing is, even when you came to us, you were still kind of like, yeah, I would try to tell a friend and they'd be like, hey, dog, like you were lucky. They didn't even see it for what it was. So even though you probably tried in your way to tell it, you were never heard correctly.
Yeah. And there's that stigma,
Mm-hmm.
Say a little more about that.
Well, just the stigma, and a good example of that stigma would be That's My Boy. I don't know if you know the movie, Adam Sandler. He's having sex at a young age as rape with his older teacher, and to make it look like it's okay, like this is okay thing to do. And that's the stigma. That's what people think is, you're young, you're having sex with an older woman. That's cool. That's okay. That's a fantastic thing that happened. When in reality, it's traumatizing. It destroys your life.
Yeah.
And I've said it before, to them it's one moment, but to us it's the rest of our lives.
Well,
we're stuck with the trauma, and we're stuck with dealing with the trauma for the rest of our lives.
And they may say, well, it was consensual, but when you're a child, it's not consensual because you can't consent to something you don't understand.
Exactly. And at a young age like that, our brains are still developing, so we can't understand that.
Mm-hmm. So it's been a process, and I feel like has it been 2 years since you originally told us your story?
I think 3 years now.
3 years?
3 years? I believe it's been 3.
Yeah.
I think it was 11 or 21. I mean, 21.
Wow.
I'd have to look back at the.
Yeah. So look at the process that you've gone through, and then you've even remembered more stuff. You've, done some more work around it. And then here at work, you have this, you get triggered, you remember, and fortunately you have something to punch on, which is great to get out that aggression. And so I think the thing that it would be really easy to go, I remembered, I told my story, I'm done. But it's a process. And even though maybe even in 5 years, something else might come out, in the meantime, you're doing your advocacy work, you're doing everything you can, A, to heal and get help, and then B, to help others. But it's not like the process goes away. And wouldn't that be wonderful? But it is still, we're daily dealing with it. And
the thing is, I might not remember something from it for 10, 15 more years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And it's always going to be this continual process of healing for the rest of my life. And, in the process of that, I'm doing a lot of interviews. I just did an interview with the lady I believe she was in New Zealand, handing the shame. It's called Handing the Shame Back. I'm still doing, I'm doing a lot of work with survivors of childhood sex abuse. leading meetings for them. They have a men's meeting on Saturdays that I help with. I constantly on their Facebook posting stuff because it's important to me, getting it out there, just dispensing that information, and not just about my case, about Boy Scouts, about Catholic Church, other churches where it's happening. Just dispensing that information so people are more aware that this happens every day.
Yeah, too.
And giving men permission to be like, oh, that happened to me. Maybe I can tell my story.
Yes, exactly. And I want that. I want, if you haven't heard or told your story and you're listening, tell it, to somebody.
What would you say has changed the most for you in these 3 years since you feel like you first were able to tell your story and told it to us live and we recorded it and, sent it out there to the world? What do you think has changed the most for you since then?
My confidence has definitely gone up as far as telling my story goes, right? Like, I feel more able to tell my story to people and I'm not afraid to tell them. It is a part of me. I'm not ashamed of this. My attitude towards life has changed.
How so?
I'm not going to let this, basically, when I say that, I mean, I'm not going to let it hold me back from anything. I'm not letting her win.
Do you feel like there's a freedom now because you're not being held back?
Absolutely, I have no freedom. My walls have come down. I'm about to get engaged.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And that was a process, because it was 3 years ago. I wasn't in that right frame of mind. I was so scared. I remember talking to you, Kevin, and crying my eyes out on the phone with you.
Yeah.
Just so afraid to tell my story.
Yeah, I remember that night really well. And
it was such a huge impact on my life. Just being able to tell my story with you guys for the first time was such a huge impact on my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I really want to emphasize with this podcast is how much freedom there is being able to just tell your story and realizing that you didn't deserve it, that, you didn't earn it, it wasn't your fault, but you do deserve to get healing. And just getting to that point is so liberating for so many men, especially because until then they feel like they can't talk about it, they can't do anything about it.
Absolutely. Man, it's so liberating. I don't know how to describe it, honestly.
And that's why Kevin and I push so hard, because if we tell our story in a way on social media, on podcasts, people that need to hear it will hear it, whether or not we ever know. Because it's not about that. It's about actually telling the story. And often in my class, people will say, well, who's going to listen? Or why does my story matter? And I always say, if you are prompted to tell your story, then that's your job. Your job is to share your story because, first of all, your own healing. And then second of all, because somebody that hears it could be empowered, whether you know or not.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're giving them permission, basically. It sounds strange, but I know for me, the first time I talked about was so hard because I'd never heard any other man talk about being a survivor. And the only reason I talked about it was my friend's sister was a survivor and she talked about it. And my friend was kind of questioning and I almost had to support her by saying, look, I understand because I'm a survivor. But until then, I never could talk about because I never heard any other man talk about it. So it allows, I think it gives them permission to actually take that step.
It validates them.
Yeah.
And also gives language. I remember when I heard Kevin was a survivor, I thought that was interesting because I had been abused. Even though I didn't see myself as a victim anymore because I'd started counseling, but I didn't see myself as a survivor. I saw myself as somebody who had been abused. And so when we can get the language and we can start to look at things in a different way, there is more freedom. And that's by talking and sharing that we get that kind of inspiration and help.
Which that, and that too is huge for me, was I've started going to therapy,
Yeah.
and I've been doing cognitive behavioral therapy, and that in itself has had such a huge impact on my life. Accepting that it wasn't my fault, and dealing with any other issues that I might be having, dealing with the PTSD, dealing with the triggers, dealing with all my emotions that come with all of that.
Yeah, learning the tools on how to handle things, your issues, and in a healthy way. Because, you've been dealing with all that before, but just not in a necessarily healthy way or dealing with it well. I mean, but when you we start seeing a counselor that understands trauma and understands our issues with trauma because of trauma and how to handle those issues in a healthy way. And that's where we learn where to actually address these issues in a way that we can, move on.
Yeah. And I think with counseling too, sometimes we tell our stories, and if we tell it with survivors, they understand. But sometimes if we tell it with people who don't really understand, for instance, a lot of times when people will say, well, it wasn't your fault, you were a child. Well, we've been told it's our fault. Or we've heard people say, well, did they say no? Did they put up a fight? And so the child part of us is like, it was my fault because I didn't say no. Well, children don't know they can say no. So the counselor is able to speak in a way to that child that kind of unlocks doors that adults can't, because we see ourselves as adults. And that's really important when we share a story. If, people might be looking at us at the age we are. They don't recognize this happened when we were a child.
Just that alone, not realizing I could say no was such a huge thing for me. And it was something I held on. It was a burden I held on to for so long. I didn't say no. So this must be my fault. Even though she held me down, she put drugs and alcohol in me. I didn't say no. So it must be my fault, which was all just another way for her to hold on to. It was another form of slavery to my sexual trauma.
Yeah, for me, learning that I was groomed was a big deal, because before then, I think one of the reasons it was so repressed was I did feel it was my fault. And because I didn't, fight against it, or, I was abused by a girl. She was older than me, but still she was a girl. So, and I didn't fight back or anything, but realizing that I had been groomed, and that all of a sudden changed my perspective on what I went through, because up until then, I know I kind of felt like it was my fault.
Something else it was something I had come across during my whole advocacy, and I've actually dealt with it myself, was my story is not as big as someone else's. And realizing we can't compare each other's stories, because no matter if it happened to you for a year, or if it happened to you for, a day, or 20 years or 30 years, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
It happened to us by someone who's evil.
Yeah.
That's the only way I could describe it, evil.
Yeah.
And we can't compare our stories.
Yeah, when we start to compare, that's when we start to worry, or wonder, was it abuse or not? Was it really that bad? But and we talked about this recently, Laura, in talking about, was it abuse? The comparison isn't what matters. What matters is the effect it had on us, what the trauma we experienced, and what that trauma did to us. And that's what is the important thing to deal with, not wondering, whether my abuse was that bad or it wasn't as bad as someone else.
Yeah, it's easy for people, if they hear a story that's worse than theirs, to minimize themselves and say, well, at least this didn't happen. And I'm a big advocate of, if I ever hear at least, like, stop right now. Because, Luke, I love it that you say we can't compare, because trauma is trauma.
Mhm.
And, we can all know someone who's been through worse than us. Look at Rwanda. Look
Yeah.
at those poor children. We can always find people worse, but that doesn't give us the invitation to not do our work. So if we say, well, at least, or I wasn't that bad, or it happened a long time ago, then we will stay in our state of not being healed, and we won't get to live our life to the fullest. So whatever our trauma is, whether we think it's big T, little t, one day, I love how you said that, one day or 5 years, it matters. And what really helps us get free is to get healing, to share our story, and to find community.
Yeah, when we compare, we're basically dismissing what happened to us. And that's a terrible thing, because in a way we're treating ourselves as if we don't matter. And I know for me, I was taught that. And so I did treat myself and did dismiss myself until I actually started taking it seriously. So I think that's really important. And that's one of the reasons Lori and I don't talk about our story that much in this podcast. I know Mike has talked to me about, he's like, I never heard your story. And I'm going, well, the reason is because our story isn't what's important. It's the healing. It's the process. It's how we handle the trauma and the issues from the trauma that matters.
Mm-hmm. And also, as you've shown us today, Luke, our story changes. So when we first tell our story, it's almost like throw up because it's everything. But then as we tell it and share it and we begin to get healing, we tell it in different ways. And I work with a lot of people in recovery from drugs and alcohol. And as they tell their story the first time, they're going to, use the F word every other word. They're going to talk about all the drugs and all the paraphernalia. But then as they start healing, they're going to leave those things out because those are triggers to the people that they're sharing with. And they know they can share the story of hope versus throwing out all the triggers. And so the beauty of telling our story is that our story begins to evolve. And like with you and Kevin, that happened for me too, more things come. And so I always say when people are sharing their story of recovery, if they're going to a place where people are just off the streets, they may have to use that kind of language. If they're going to a ladies group who's going to support their ministry, they're not going to want to be using the F word every other.
Right.
Or if they're going where they're looking for funding, they're going to tell it in a way of, look how I turned my life around versus I use these needles, and so that's why story is so important, because by telling it, it has the natural way to evolve and be more useful and more helpful and reach more people as we go. But it all starts with telling it the first time, with being seen, heard, believed.
And with that too, some people, they hear it, they're like, well, your story changed. Why does your story keep changing? You must be lying about something. And it's not that. It's like you said, it's a growing process. And as you grow, things are going to change. You're going to remember more. You're going to see more. Your mindset's going to change. And once your mindset changes, there's going to be a lot more hope, a lot more good feelings coming out of it rather than negative.
Mm-hmm. For instance, when we start to recognize that we can forgive and that forgiveness is about ourselves, then our language changes, because, it goes from that dirty rat to I'm healing my life. So again, that's why our story does evolve. And I love that we have permission for it to evolve and for us to just continue to grow and learn. And sometimes remember things that we thought we were done with, but also, recognizing that as it evolves, there are people that need to hear that are going to hear it.
In my story, when I first told it, it was that dirty bitch, and I wanted, I was angry. I wanted her dead, and I've got to a point now where I'm able to forgive her, and not just, and it's not for her, it's forgiving her for me.
Right. Like you're still doing the work of maybe going to the police and everything, but in your heart, that as long as she has rent in your heart, you can't heal.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what also has been changing for you as far as how you're handling things? What are some of the things that's been helping you with your issues and with triggers and so forth? What have you found that's helped?
I've definitely been working on what triggers me a lot more in therapy. I had a lot of social anxiety issues, so we're slowly in therapy. I'm working on that. I'm able to go out more. Whereas when I first started therapy last year, I wasn't even able to go outside the doors.
Mm.
I wasn't able, other than going to work, I would go work, then come home and be in my room, which is a sad life. Now I'm able to go to church, and I'm actually able, I'm slowly getting there, but I'm able to talk to people. And it's amazing to be able to do that. I'm on medication to help with the nightmares, Prosocin. That's helping a lot with dealing with my nightmares. I don't have them as often, so that's definitely a good thing. I don't know. I would say mostly it's been my attitude towards life that's changed. Just being able to look at people different, to talk to people differently, trying to accept things for what they are. Working on myself. I've been doing a lot of self-help books. I've been working on my anger and serenity and getting peace within, because I really don't want to be that angry person who's living with this for the rest of my life, and it is a process. It's always going to be a process.
And kudos to you, Luke, because what we've realized is when we don't heal, we're hurting the people around us inadvertently. And when we heal, then we're being kind and loving to those around us. And so I think it's really interesting that you're saying, and now I'm about to be engaged. And, like that relationship has obviously evolved as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it was last year. I mean, I was struggling last year.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. I planned to come back for my sister's wedding and kill myself. And then I met this wonderful girl, and I started going, talking to my therapist more openly and telling her things. And, I even told her, this was my thought back in early January, late December, early January. And we talked about that. And I don't struggle with that as often. But I struggle with a lot of things yet, and I accept that I struggle with things. I accept that I still struggle with my anger and depression and anxiety and, everything else, my PTSD, all that, and that those are things I got to work on.
I love that you said that, because I think a lot of people think once they start therapy that things are going to just change. And I love the way you talk about how your relationship with your therapist and with others have evolved just, and it wasn't sudden necessarily. It took work, and it's still taking work. I think it's important to realize that this is hard, but it also, once you start it, it gets easier as you go because you learn how to do it. And as you learn how to do it, it's like you get through the learning curve, you get past the learning curve, and you start to work on things. And I think what really makes the biggest difference is realizing you can change. And then once you realize that, it becomes important to work on it because you want to change.
Absolutely. And I realize also that it's not going to take a year or 2 years to go through therapy. It's going to take multiple years of therapy and multiple things to get better.
But it's worth it. And that's what
exactly.
I think once you find out it's worth it and that you're worth it, that you deserve it. And when you do the work, that better things start happening, and you deserve those better things.
And then when a crisis comes along, you've got a little more grounding under you, because we all know life happens and things happen.
Yeah.
And when we've done the work, like you say, the anger, maybe you get in a car accident, the anger might be different because you've done the work and you recognize, oh, everything's not my fault. Everything, and so I think that's the beauty of it. It gives us that foundation that will hold us during the upcoming beautiful things, marriage, children, all of that, as well as, the grieving things, the hard things. And that's what I've been so grateful for, is it gives me a whole different perspective when I walk through different difficult things. There's an actor that just passed away, Sir Lawrence, you know who I'm talking about? And he told this story about, he was about to go on stage, and he was supposed to come in this door, and this couple was having this fight on stage, and they were really getting into it, and they threw a chair and they blocked the door. And so it's his turn to come in, and he's trying to come in, and he's pointing to the guy. He's going, the chair's in the way. And the guy kind of walks over by him because it was live. And he says, use the difficulty. He's like, what? I can't get in. He goes, use the difficulty. If it's comedy, trip over the chair. If it's, drama, pick it up and throw it and shatter it. Use the difficulty. And I thought that is kind of the epitome of recovery, because when we're well enough, we can use those things to our benefit rather than seeing them as a big roadblock. Just the difference in your countenance from when we first met you. There was a sadness, and, we of course fell in love with you right away, but just seeing these moments of joy on your face and seeing how being in therapy is making such a difference, and that would we have chosen this for our life? No, but we can use these things now to have a better life. And like your advocacy work, it is a beautiful thing when somebody does share and we can be like, I understand, I believe. It doesn't mean we have to even tell them our story. Sometimes it's just a matter of letting them know they're going to be okay. Been there, done that, and you've got this. Like simple things like that now that we have to offer because we're on our own healing path.
Absolutely. And that is a huge part of it for me too, is just letting them know, hey, here's my number. If you're having a difficult time, call me. It doesn't matter what time of day or night it is, call me. If I don't answer or leave a message, I'll call you back. But I'm going to call you back. I'm going to be there for you.
Yeah.
So if you, if someone was listening and had never shared their story, has never talked about with anyone, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to share it, and that it's okay. It is okay to share it. This does not define who you are as a person at all. And what the perpetrator, the evil person that did this to you did was not your fault at all. And I'm there for you. Other survivors are there for you. We're always going to be there for you because we're family.
I love that.
Yeah, that's so important, is just to know it doesn't define you. You're not alone, and we're here for you.
Those are like the three key things. Well, tell your story. It doesn't define you. You're not alone. And what was the last one?
We're family.
Oh, yeah, we're family.
Oh, and it's not your fault. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those are the key things that when somebody hears those and can begin to believe it, their life can change.
Yeah. I mean, look at how your life has changed.
It's changed a lot, and I thank God every day for it.
Yeah, me too. So.
Well, thank you so much, Luke. It's so good to see your update.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I thank you for all your blessings, and we just praise you for the work you are doing in Luke's life and the work he is doing for others, his advocacy, and also the healing work he is doing in his life, which is affecting everyone he knows. And whether he knows it or not, it's changing his outlook, which is helping all those around him. So I just pray that you would continue to be present in his life and give him the strength and the hope and meaning in his life, that he would continue to do the work that he's doing and find meaning in what he is doing. And Lord, I just pray you would help to remove his burdens, especially his nightmares, Lord, and just heal him from the trauma so that he could be a source of healing for others, that he can bring hope to others from his journey, from his life. And Lord, I just pray for anyone listening that they would know that it isn't their fault, that they can talk about it, and it's not defining them, but they do deserve help. They do deserve to get healing. And Lord, that you would be there for them. In your name I pray.
Father, I thank you that our mess becomes our message. I thank you for the work you're doing in Luke's life. Thank you for bringing him our way, letting us get to know him. I thank you that his message is of hope and struggle. It would be so great to wrap it all up in a bow and go, yeah, life is grand now. I told my story and we're good, but that it is a process, and life is a process. If we ever think we can get through life without learning and growing and having, some good days and bad days, that's just not a possibility. But I thank you that he has chosen chosen to do the work and to tell his story, to speak the words, and to be willing to be vulnerable so other people might know that they're not alone. I thank you so much for the work you're doing through him. And I just pray that I just pray for blessings on his life as he moves forward with all of the things he's doing in your son's name.
Father, I thank you for Kevin and Lori. Lori, bless them. I thank you that you brought them into my life and they started me on this healing journey. And I've been able to find hope and peace. And I continue to find hope and peace. I pray for other survivors, whether they've told their story or not. I ask you to be with them, bless them, keep them. In your name I pray.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.